Welcome all to this training lesson on how to fill in the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel. You may be watching this because you're on an IC Agile course, or perhaps you've joined the Agile Affinity Academy and want to fill in the wheel, or perhaps you're just curious and have come across this useful resource and you want some help on how to fill it in. So during the next hour, we're going to go through each of the guidance. We're going to show you how to fill the wheel in. There's two options for this. So I'm just going to share my screen. There is a JPEG version where you can print this out or use some kind of paint version to fill it in with the numbers 1 to 5. These numbers will become more important as we go through. Well, there is also a digital version now, which you can open up and make a copy of, which a lot of people are finding useful in this new digital world we live in. So if you do want to use the digital version, first thing you need to do is go to File and make a copy. Rename it to your name so that you know whose it is. Click Share with the same people. Untick Copy Comments. Select the folder that you want it in and click OK. If we all managed to create a copy, either the image version or the digital version in our little group today?
Yes, John.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Not yet. Give me a second.
That's all right.
Particularly inept. Where's the chat window again?
The chat, so more and then chat. While you're doing that, I'm just going to show you where the origin of the wheel came from. So the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel was created at a Scrum coaching retreat in London a couple of years ago now. Rickard Jones was a founding member of the wheel. I have done a lot of contributions since, but I wasn't part of that original group. So Rick, do you want to just give a quick overview of where the idea came from and how it was formed?
Sure. So at these coaching retreats, there's an open space where people suggest ideas. An idea was suggested to create an agile coaching growth wheel so that people could look at where their agile journey is taking them from a coaching perspective, from an agile coaching perspective. So how do you measure where you are with a self-assessment? How do you measure where you want to go? What are the areas you can identify for improvement? If you don't know what those areas are, if there's no transparency, even just for yourself intrinsically, as an intrinsic motivation, then you can't really inspect and adapt upon that unless it's transparent. So this wheel is a tool to help bring some of those ideas and transparency to you, so you can therefore then look at that wheel, see where you're at and inspect and adapt. And it may, as we'll learn, dynamically change over time. And so this is a tool to help you do that, because there was a tool already out there from Lisa Adkins, but time had gone on, and through our learnings and through our engagements and through actually coaching the field, many coaching practitioners who were at this retreat felt that that particular tool, called the TIE Fighter model, sometimes from Lisa Adkins, the needs for an agile coach had expanded beyond that somewhat. So therefore, the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel came about to help improve and support their coaches on their journey.
Fantastic. There's a couple of ways you can use the wheel. The way we use it within the groups that we run is as a self-assessment model, as Rick said. So we'll go through the wheel, all of the different sections of the wheel, one by one, and we'll assess ourselves as to where we think we are in that area. Each section has 5 levels of assessment. In fact, there is a 6th level, as we found out. Level 1 is still some knowledge, and therefore there is a level 0, which could be, I don't know anything about that competency at all. So we've got 0 to 5 at each level. The terms at each level aren't so important, but what we do encourage is consistency throughout. We start off with the Agile and Lean practitioner area. You can read through the guidance in your own time, but the key essence here is that the fundamental background and understanding of an Agile coach or someone doing an Agile coaching role has to be that they understand and have Agile and Lean knowledge. And this is in two key areas. There is the mindset and there is the frameworks, methods, and practices that are involved. So in our wheel, I'm just going to open here. We can go to the AC skills section, which nicely lines up with the document. And we've got 3 columns in here. So we've got past, present, and future. So the reason we've got 3 is so you can measure yourself. So today we're going to be filling in the present. The next time you come to assess yourself, we roughly say every 3 to 6 months, depending on how much learning you've done during that stage. You'll simply cut and paste those into the past column, and then you'll look at your present again from scratch. You can also have a future column if you want to, where you can set yourself targets. What we suggest here is to only focus on a couple of areas at a time. So a couple of competencies, 1 or 2 maximum. Otherwise, what we've found is you'll spread yourself too thin and you won't get any, make any benefit in any area. So we'll start with the Agile Lean mindset. So you can see the 5 areas, levels 1 to 5 on the left-hand side. And then you simply read through the reflections. So these are guidance and reflective. It's not a checklist. So in order to call yourself a level 3, you don't necessarily need to have all of the things in the level 3 marked off. You might have 4 in the level 3, you're not sure on 1, but perhaps you've got a couple of marks in the level 4. So it's just for guidance and reflection rather than a checklist of a black or white. What we do say, however, is to try and stay consistent throughout. So if you're really strict in some areas that you must have all the things checked off because that's what you've decided, then do that throughout. Because this is a self-assessment model, one of the things that you can't do very well with this model is compare yourself to others. So we don't encourage you to use this for performance appraisals, example, to compare to other coaches in your organization. You can use it as outcomes and growth and areas you want to focus on going forward, perhaps into the next year. So have a quick...
Yeah, and that's one of the originators. That was the original essence of it, is not to be using it as to compare people's results against each other.
So have a read through in the group. And if there's any that you're not quite sure on, then it probably means that others watching this video aren't sure on, and then we can discuss them in more detail. Some people like to start from beginner and go down to 5. Others prefer to start at 5 and go up and see how far up the scale they need to go. Both of those are okay.
Hi, John.
Hi.
How do you deal with a psychological perspective? Because in my mind, I'm on a learning journey, and I feel like no matter what I know or what I knew before I came for this course, I feel it's a learning journey and I have room for improvement. So based upon that, I obviously want to mark myself low. So what do I do in that case?
So one of the things we encourage you after you've filled it on and in your own is getting a peer to have a coaching session around what you've put down, which will include some challenge around some of those areas. So some people are quite generous on themselves, others are really quite tough on themselves. And what we found is that that can just even things out a little bit. And it's always hard to put a 5, right? So thought leadership through creating their own new values and principles that help people achieve greater levels of agility. Now, Ricard and I actually spent some time focusing on what beliefs we thought were in an agile mindset and worked through the principles, values, how those beliefs are formed through looking at other people's works, and how the beliefs are what make up the mindset. So I'm going to put a 5 for this one.
Also, that's just one example. There's other examples. One of the co-authors of the Agile HR Manifesto, I think Femi is as well. So therefore, we've worked on helping craft new values and principles that have helped organizations increase their agility.
Now, going back to what Agboola said, or I'm inferring what he said, was that just because I'm a 5 doesn't mean that's my job done. Now,
Yes.
if I don't do anything else to continue to progress thought leadership in the agile mindset, next year, then by default, I'll have already gone down to a 4. So it has to be fresh, current, and continuing to show thought leadership in that area. And I hate that word, thought leadership. Perhaps we should change that word in the next version of the guide. So the great thing about this guide is that we take feedback on board all of the time, and we're constantly updating the guide to show that. So we're on version 2.1 now. We started off after the initial version was 0.5. So you can see that we've progressed a couple of major versions and quite a few minor versions in that time. So now we're going to go on to agile approaches, frameworks, methods, and practices.
So that means the document is a living, breathing document. It's not an historical artifact like the Agile Manifesto.
And it's all creative. It's all Creative Commons as well. So you can actually take the document and adapt it to whatever you need, as long as you credit the original contributors. So we look at agile approaches. So some people, as I said, might be on a 0 in this area. So even to be a 1, you need to be able to describe how at least one agile approach and how it relates to the Agile Manifesto, and can explain at least 3 agile practices commonly used by agile teams. Now, sometimes we get people who are coming from a coaching background and haven't had much exposure to agile, and so this is the real first area that they've got to spend a lot of focus on. So they could be a 0 in this area when they first fill in the wheel.
But still great coaches.
Yeah. So that's where we're saying you need a balance of all these areas in order to be a good agile coach. And that's what makes this so hard, this role. So here we've got invents and modifies practices to match the context, active contributor to the agile community, consistently identifying and developing, sharing existing and emerging agile approaches, and helps the organization evolve the process that is most value to them. So at the moment, so I would have been a 4 probably until quite recently, but some of you may have noticed in the last couple of months, I've started releasing a lot of work around agile scoping into the community. I've always been heavily involved in the community. And so I'm going to increase myself from a 4 to a 5 in that area.
Can I just come in and reiterate a point that we discussed in the previous assessment? So it is possible that an individual may score, may have 3 bullet points under journey person, under crafts person, they might have 2 or 3, and under guide, innovator, they might have just 1. So it's down to the individual to determine how they balance everything out and come up with the average score that reflects where they think they are.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's about an average score. I would say the key is to be consistent throughout. So mark yourself consistently throughout the whole wheel. Otherwise,
Okay.
it's going to be very hard to decide then where to focus or where I might want to focus. For me personally, it's more of like a gut feel. So I might really feel like I'm a journey person and I've got 4, and then there's one that I haven't got. So I'll mark myself down as a 3, but then when I'm having my session with my coach after, or my agile coaching supervisor, or however I want to go through this, maybe with a peer, that's one of the points that I'm going to have that conversation with them about. I'm probably going to want a second opinion. Does that make sense for me?
It does. Thank you very much, John. Thank
So
you.
I might go 5 question mark for now, and then I can catch up with Rick later and use kind of and then we can say, well, you know, I know I've done a bit in the community lately around this agile scoping, which is helping the organization evolve the process that is most of value to them. But have I actually done enough yet to be a guide or innovator, or am I still a craftsperson, for example? So then we go on to facilitating. So we call these the core skill competencies. So we have the Agile Lean, which is kind of the fundamental of everything we do as an Agile coach. Then we have the 4 core skill competencies of facilitating coaching, facilitate learning, and advising. And then we have the 3 service competencies of serving the team, the product owner, and the organization. The first one of these areas is guiding the process. So does someone else want to talk about their thinking about where they are? For now, I've done a couple.
I'll go with this. So after the IC Agile coaching course, my rating was 4, and I've had some hands-on involvement in guiding the process since the course was completed. And I've also successfully completed an additional Lean Agile course. But I want to be a little bit on the cautious side and still retain myself at 4, because I'm able to facilitate in any context. I can facilitate large events, and I can work with other facilitators as a mentor to help them develop. The reason why I don't want to move to 5 just yet is that I still need to invent and modify practices to match context. It's one of my aspirations, so I will set some goals and work alongside one of my mentors to achieve that goal. So for now, I'm a 4.
Okay. Cool. We can see that there. Okay. So we'll move on to the next section, which is creating an environment of accountability.
If I take this one again so that I can sort of free up time for others later. On completion of the IC Agile coaching course, I scored 3.5 points for myself. They have been arbitrary, but there have been some additional activities that I've undertaken recently to create an environment of accountability. And specifically, I'm able to create an environment of trust and respect in a variety of situations. I'm able to build accountability within a team to reduce dependency on the coach. so that they become self-sufficient. I'm able to help teams create the necessary mechanisms for themselves to reach high performance. And that is probably the most important one for me, because I've been able to take people to a place of psychological safety. And finally, holding teams accountable for building and sticking to these behaviors is something that I've also been able to practically demonstrate. So that for me will stay as will be increased to a 4.
Okay. Yeah, one that seems to puzzle some people for this one is this whole thing about creating accountability. So holds the team accountable for building and sticking to these behaviors. Now, from an agile point of view, a great example of this is the retrospective. So if I facilitate a retrospective for a team, one of the things that I need to do as a facilitator is ensure they take some actions, but then my facilitation doesn't stop there, because if the team don't go through and achieve those actions, then the session was a waste of time. So how, as a facilitator, do I hold them accountable for those actions past just the meeting? So some people think facilitation is just the 1-hour session that you may run, but actually facilitation starts much before that with planning, and much after that with this accountability, looking after the actions. One of the dangers we often get into as facilitators is that we start to take the actions on ourselves. The problem with that is that once we start doing that, it's very hard to stop doing that, and therefore the team is going to be less likely to become self-managing in the future.
Just to add to that, holding to account is a concept that I've come across to ensure that the team own their actions. So under actions and accountability, the facilitator, as you mentioned, doesn't actually take responsibility for delivering the actions, but make sure that the team commit to taking those actions that would ensure that they deliver.
Yeah, exactly, Femi. Okay, we're going to go into coaching now. Coaching is, in my opinion, one of the most powerful tools we've got as Agile coaches. It's not the only tool we need. There is one train of thought in the industry that says that Agile coaches should only coach. I don't agree with that, but I do agree that it is the most powerful tool we've got, and one that I'll often start with. Again, this is separated into 2 sections: the mindset, the tools, and the techniques. We'll start with the mindset. Does anyone want to volunteer for where they are with the coaching mindset?
I can, John, if it helps, yeah?
Yeah.
Yes, so number 5 is quite a big one for me, discovering new coaching principles, concepts, and sharing them with the coaching community, because the coaching community, or especially the Agile coaching community, is quite active in that and quite proactive in finding out all these different approaches and blending them together. So I don't think I'm a 5. I think I can be a 4 though, and have been, because I can act as a personal coach outside of context. So I come from a technical background, and currently I'm coaching people on the business side and at quite high levels in business leadership as well as people who work on the ground, including in branches and in call centers in the business client I'm working with. So I can coach outside of my context, and I can treat them to their emotional reactions. Optimistic even in the face of failure. Well, yes, one has to be as a coach, unfortunately. I think it's a requirement of the job. Yes, I think if you're a coach, you have to be optimistic, because you're going to have quite a few failures. It's never going to go swimmingly smooth. Participates in the coaching community, absolutely. Always participating in the Agile coaching community and somewhat in the professional one as well.
Yeah, I think this is specifically asking about the professional coaching community, right?
Yeah,
So this is like
yeah.
ICF chapters, or you know, my example would be my systemic modeling community that I'm part of.
I mean,
Perhaps the ORSC community you were part of for a while, but not so much anymore.
yeah, a long time I was part of the ORSC community, and more involved in ICF and how that works these days, rather than specific coaching approach has been my focus to professional coaching. So I think I'm about a 4, but definitely not a 5. I think 5 would be a stretching it for me. So not a 5. Who knows in the future, but definitely 4 at the moment.
And just to point, some of the people on this call might be scoring quite high in some of these areas. You might be in a different part of your journey, and this tool can be used depending, no matter where you are, as a way of growing and reflecting. And actually, it's probably more useful for people who are early on in their journey than people who have been here a while. The difference it makes to me is it stops me being complacent. So how do I stay you know, focused on the coaching community, for example, so that I can stay on top of my game? Coaching tools and techniques. So the interesting one here is at level 4. So in order to get level 4, the guidance is that you've undertaken a coaching education accredited by the ICF or equivalent.
Does the ICAGILE ACC qualify?
No. So the ICF is much more in depth. So I can't remember the amount of hours exactly you need to become an ICF ACC, Rick. Have you got that off the top of your head?
75.
70.
Is it 75? I thought it was 60. I thought it was 60. Is it 75?
75, yes.
I thought it was 60. Maybe
it may have gone
changed.
up since we did it, Rick, you know?
Yeah, 60.
Out of the
60.
75, X number of hours has to be paid as well. So there's a breakdown. I mean, I've been sort of compiling all the details because my ICF journey will start sometime next year.
Okay. So if you want to know any details on the ICF, then reach out to Femi.
The latest ones, yes.
The latest
or check the websites.
Or maybe, yeah.
Check the website. Check the website. You do have to have a coaching log, that's for sure. You have to pass an exam as well, which is quite tricky. It's not an easy one, and so you have to revise for that and understand and go on a personal journey. And you have to submit at least, I think, 2 coaching recordings of you coaching in actions with a transcript as well. So they'll read the transcript, and sometimes they'll audit the actual recordings as well. So it can be quite rigorous.
Yeah. I can only speak for myself, but my journey to become ICF was very rigorous, very hard, but I learned a lot about myself through that journey more than anything else. Okay, so I've put myself as a 4 for that one. Now we'll go into facilitate learning. So
I've just dropped half a point for myself there on that basis.
There you go. That's the power of doing this in a small group. You can kind of hold each other accountable and see things that you don't see when you fill this in on your own. So facilitate learning, some people are interested that we've put mentoring in here, but for us, mentoring is around someone who's got a lot of experience in a certain topic or knowledge, passing on that knowledge to someone else. There are some other characteristics around mentoring as well, such as both people should learn from the experience, that we're not just imparting knowledge without permission. So we're giving people information, but we're giving them the choice as to whether that is useful or not. Were you going to add something, Rick?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is, so it has facilitate learning. Some people might understand it as learning and development if they come from a HR background. This isn't fully encompassing learning and development. Facilitate learning, these are some of the aspects of it, and there's much more to learning and development than that, but they might see it as that. And we've also jumped across the other side of the wheel, just in case you want to know where we're navigating.
Yes, so let's get the paper version of the wheel up a minute.
Yeah.
So we jump across a little bit here. So we started in the Agile Lean Practitioner, which is just to the left of the center, before going to facilitating and coaching, which are on this left-hand side. And now we're doing the other two core competencies, which are to the right of the center of the wheel. So now we're in facilitate learning. Good point, Rick, for those filling in the analog version. Okay, so have a look through there. It's a little bit less detail in the mentoring one. Rick and I have been doing a little bit more research in this area lately. And unlike facilitation or coaching, there doesn't seem to be a standard board for mentoring or a standard certification or association that look after mentors, which we're a little bit surprised about. Seems a little bit less defined than facilitating and coaching. Hence why there's a slightly less guidance, I think. So I think I do a lot of mentoring, helping and supporting, especially in the Agile coaching world. But I wouldn't say I invent and modify practices to match the context. I find mentoring important, but I'm not passionate enough to kind of push it forward. So I'm definitely for. The other thing to remember when you fill in this in is that you don't need to be a 5 in all areas. In fact, it's impossible. So there is no Agile coach in the world that I know of that would be a 5 in all of these areas. And so I'd encourage you not to have that as your goal. You need to be, if we think about software development in general, we talk about being T-shaped or E-shaped or pie-shaped. And that's definitely what I've found the most pattern here. So you're going to have deep understanding and knowledge in one area and enough knowledge in the other areas to get by and help and support organizations. So teaching, again, teaching's in two sections. There's the teaching itself, and then there's the building of the educating program. So we start with just the teaching. The thing with the core competencies as well is we've tried to separate them out as much as possible from the Agile knowledge. Apart from mentoring, because mentoring, especially someone in Agile coaching, for example, or Agile, you're probably going to need some knowledge of Agile to get to the higher levels. The others, you could be a 5 without having any Agile knowledge whatsoever, because I can teach. As long as I'm a competent teacher, then I could be a 5 in that space at the moment. Of course, to be able to teach an Agile topic, then I might need to increase my Agile and Lean area first. Does anyone want to share their thinking in this area?
Happy to have a go. I've got some background noise. I'm having some building work done, so I'll. If I cut off quickly, it's because you'll hear drilling. So, okay. But yeah, happy to have a go at this. It's not an area that I am particularly experienced in, so I would possibly mark myself as a 3. I have done some training in both. Well, various different topics, but specifically Agile with another Agile trainer and got hands-on with some helping with some CSM training, and also developed other CSMs on the advanced, so sort of spent some time with them on there and assisted with some teaching on that. I certainly wouldn't put myself in a 4, but it's something that I don't have a particular passion in particularly, but something that I have found useful. So looking at the elements, I would score myself as a 3.
Okay. And then we'll move on to building educational programs. So there's 2 key stages here for me in this. Up to journey person, it's all about being able to create a course from scratch using adult learning techniques. For example, training from the back of the room, using your skills you've learnt there. Perhaps you've learnt it in a different way, that's also okay. To get above a 3, it's more around building and supporting the learning and development area of an organization, creating course development for whole areas of an organization. So taking a Scrum Master from an apprentice to an expert, for example. How do we take someone on that journey over a long time? How do we get all of the funding to do that? How do we support their learning journey, not just as a one-off interaction, but ongoing coaching and support as they go? All of those things. So I'm going to go for a 4.
Again, I would score myself a 3. I have put programs in place so it's not just for me about just saying you need to do this, this, and this. It's iterative, it's ongoing, and it's about enabling them to demonstrate it and continually do it over a period of time.
Yeah. I'm actually going to put myself as a 5 for this, because I think one of the things Rick and I kind of pride ourselves on is building things in very innovative and new ways that no one else is doing and trying to push the industry forward. And we're working on a couple of interesting projects at the minute where we're really kind of trying to change how others before us have done certain things.
And we release stuff to Tasty Cupcakes as well, that website. So we put it out there for others to consume as well. So it's released into the community, open sourced, of course.
Yep. So we're on to advising. Advising is often frowned upon in the Agile coaching community. But I especially think the managing engagement piece is one of the things that's really lacking within the Agile coaching world at the moment. And that's an area that I'm spending a lot of my focus on and is a real passion of mine. So I'm going to go with the Agile scoping work that I'm currently doing. I'm going to go straight in with a 5 for that one. Has anyone got any questions about anything they don't quite understand?
Can I make a comment? Not so much as a question, and it's not a challenge of the wording that's used here. With craftsperson, the last 3 bullet points merely refer to the ability to manage engagement, the ability to manage budgets, and the ability to look after the well-being. So as long as an individual has a degree of confidence that they have the ability, they should be able to consider themselves as a 4. Yeah, I know it might be debatable if they haven't physically done it, but they have the ability. The ability can come from so many different channels. Some of them can come from training. Some of them could come from previous experience in certain areas. For instance, I'm an accountant, and I know that managing a budget is never going to be an impediment for me. So I know that I've got ingrained ability for such requirements. So I just wanted to know what you think about that.
I think the wording is, as you said, my inference is that if I wanted to call myself a 4, that I would have wanted to have done those things at least once in reality, but it's a self-assessment. So just because I think that doesn't mean you have to think that, Femi. And like you said, you've got some special skills from your accountancy background, so I can't really relate to whether that's right or not. Giving advice. So sometimes it is the right thing to just give advice as an Agile coach.
John, I can jump in here.
Mm-hmm.
Two things from me. I initially, before I started the course, I used to believe I was a 4. When I started the course and I understood the detail behind what it is to give advice, I marked myself down as a 2. Then at this current moment in time, I think I'm within the spectrum of a 2.5/3. Reason being is when I look at the detail, I'm looking at the 3 as a journey person, and I'm creating awareness by presenting hard facts to the organization. Is something I've done. Had practiced multiple techniques to provide feedback. Is you do it subconsciously, but at the same time, you might not necessarily know you're doing it. And the last option is aware of the limitations of knowledge and has the courage to say, I don't, which sometimes could be a bit of a challenge. You want to be a little bit, if I can use the word sly about that particular without trying to step on any feet. So that was where I always struggled, I was always trying to find balance within an organization, not to necessarily step on anybody. So I'll put myself as a 3 within giving advice.
Thank you for that, Agboola. Yeah, that fundamental understanding that sometimes advice needs to be given, but more importantly, knowing the right time to give advice and when not to is one that I think most Agile coaches have had to kind of learn through failure, right? By
John, can I just ask can I ask a quick question, please?
Mm-hmm.
When we were on the coaching course, you gave a very nice context to, because you appreciate it's a little bit taboo, and I understand why, but you gave a really good example, and I've been trying to rack my brain to remember how you sort of, if you like, set up the ability to, if you like, transition from a coach to giving advice. You sort of turn you set up created that environment to be able to do that. Would you mind sharing that again?
Yeah, so if I'm transitioning from coaching to, for example, mentoring or giving advice, which in that context would be quite similar, I would just say I would always ask for permission. So it's asking for permission to transition. So I say, oh, I've got a few ideas that I think might be able to help you right now. Would you like to hear them? And that's just getting that permission to switch from coaching to another stance that for whatever reason we decide is more useful. Perhaps it's because they're really struggling. Perhaps it's because we haven't got time. Could be a number of reasons why. But what I try not to do anymore is give advice without permission.
Mm-hmm.
I don't assume people want to know my advice or think that I know better than they do. I haven't found that very useful because people are less likely to take my advice that way, I've found.
Yeah, I just thought it was a nice way of just tilting the conversation where necessary and then reverting back. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
Much appreciated.
So I'm going to do the frowned upon thing. I'm going to give myself a 0.5. Advising is always one of...
How are we doing for time, John?
We've got 3 more sections to get through. So we've got team
Come on.
dynamics. So we're in serving the team now. So we're in these leadership competencies.
So we jumped across to the other side again of
Yeah.
the wheel.
So now we're down here in the
But
service ones. We're starting with serving the team, which is bottom left. So team dynamics.
Okay, I'll bite. Yeah, my scores were 2 for the past. I put myself a 3. For now, I'd like to move towards a 4, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I've only been doing this, being a Scrum Master coach for kind of about 5 years. So I still find most of the things I do, I'm still learning, or I'm still capable of being surprised, if that makes sense. And yeah, that's probably about it, really. I know kind of all the tools to kind of do. You've got the retros, or the using the boards, you know, like sort of Kanban style to see where the blockers are or whatever it's going to be. You know, it's kind of watching people at dailies, you know, kind of see if how people's body language. But yeah, I would say I'm still surprised regularly. So yeah, I put myself as a kind of a 3 for now, and I'd like to be heading towards a 4, I guess. But I think a lot of that's going to come from experience.
Yeah. So again, that'd be one of the
longer.
things that you talk to your coach about a bit more detail about how you're going to move from that 3 to that 4. So coaching the team.
I'll carry on with that, I guess. Coaching the team, I put myself as a 1 in the past because I was pretty inexperienced. Now I'm a 3. You know, I can kind of work through things with the team. You know, get them to bring out the problems they've got and try, without telling them too much, you know, try to kind of bring them towards finding their own solutions. Although sometimes I've done like you know, delivery lead roles where part of my role is kind of telling people, you know, kind of, so we say, steering people towards doing stuff. Basically, and simply about getting results, because sometimes that's just the way it is. Yeah, and I'd like to head towards being a 4, I guess. So.
And to finish off the 3, Chris, what about starting teams?
Starting teams, I used to be a 0, and then, oh god, it'd be last March, I think it was. I landed in a place where they were doing an agile transformation, and they were completely waterfall. Like, they've been working. They had an 18-month project, and they spent 9 months producing about 400 pages of functional specs and about 500 of technical specs, and they hadn't actually written any code. No, I'm genuinely not exaggerating. The technical specs was about that thick. It was like, why have you made this? You haven't done anything. So that was in at the deep end, really. It was quite good in some ways, because it was almost like anything you do would be an improvement on what they currently had, because they had nothing.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's quite a good place to start at, because you know you can't go too far wrong, because when you start at 0, it's all good. And yeah, so that was quite interesting, getting that done. I think I learned a lot doing that, and I've done a couple more things since then with teams that were not quite needed starting, but they were just a collection of individuals, and needed to be kind of, they needed help kind of getting back into some kind of you know, coordination and working together. So I put myself as a 3 for that one. Again, might be a 2 or a 3. I think a 3 might be being generous on myself, but I've been quite harsh on some of the other stuff, so maybe it balances. And yeah, sort of like to get a bit better than that, really.
Yeah. So don't do what Chris did. Try and be consistent throughout the wheel, so that you don't get these spikes in some areas and not others. So
Yeah.
we're learning through doing. The interesting thing about starting the team, I find, is that it actually makes up to 30% of team performance, they reckon. So John Hatman in his studies says that team launch is really, really important.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
serving the product owner. So we've got 2 subsections here: facilitate product definition and coaching the product owner. So this is one of my favorite ones in number 4 here. Has successfully defined and launched a product they had responsibility for. So you can't get to the higher levels of facilitating product definition unless you've basically been a product owner or a product manager.
John, I actually thought you were talking to me. But yes, I have had the great experience of being a product owner at some point in my career. And again, coming to the course sort of refreshed my experience of what I did previously. But most importantly, the course gave me an opportunity to sort of visualize how I did it and what I did right. So initially, I put myself again psychologically. I was coming in like I did it the way I understood it. Now I gave myself a 2. Now I'm feeling like I'm a 3.5 thereabout because from a facilitation perspective and creating refinement, product vision, all that kind of good stuff was definitely key towards building a product. Then most importantly, the customer-centric approach. That was really, really key. Understanding the customer, having those early involvements with the customers and the stakeholders to make sure that they were involved. Then, the reason why I put myself as I would say a 3.54 right now, is because I've been through the whole spectrum. I've been involved in releasing, been involved in feedback cycle, understood the MVPs and what that, sort of entails and how that improves the product. Again, I keep on reiterating the fact that I think the growth wheel would help you understand the learning journey. So yeah, that's my penny's worth.
Great. And I'm passionate about people who can serve the product owner. I think it's a very underserved area of the Agile coaching community and one that people can really add a lot of value. So well done, Agboola.
Thank you.
We've got coaching the product owner as the second one.
John, you want me to go for that one?
Yeah, you might as well, Agboola. I think have this one covered.
Yeah, I guess the coaching journey, for me, I started off again as a 2. Reason being because before I became a product owner, I was a business analyst. So that gave me the appropriate tools to sort of understand the 3 benefits of product owner participation in retrospectives, getting feedback, build coaching relationships with at least one product owner, which I think I've done quite a few different ones. And now I'm seeing myself more as a 3. Again, I always have to put the caveat that it's a learning journey. I don't want to run ahead of myself. I want to be able to enjoy this than just to do it because I put a tick in a box. So supported the product owner in sharing the return on investment to the teams. So again, it could be a situation where you're finding out that the product has hit 1 million different individuals in a short space of time. At that point in time, you know that you've hit some sort of return on investment. So that's where I put myself. But from coaching a product owner as either a Scrum Master or a coach, it takes a different set of skills to do that. You can't just necessarily be using common sense. You have to use almost, in retrospectively, in my mind right now, if I had this when I was doing most of that job, I think it would have been a beautiful opportunity to serve the team to a level beyond my imagination. So yeah, that's where I'm at.
Okay, so we're on to the final section now, serving the organization. And we'll start with organizational development. So it's quite a chunky section, this, and there's a lot in it. It doesn't actually fit on one page. again, I'm doing well in the serving organization area at the minute with all the agile scoping work that I'm currently documenting and writing down. What I've found is it's very hard for me to be high in serving the organization and serving the team. So there's a constant balancing act between the two for me, because the more I spend and focus on the organization, the less practice I get at the team level and vice versa. I don't know if others have observed the same thing, or it's just a pattern I've gone where I go to and fro these two things. Scaling, descaling. So this started off as just scaling, and then we added descaling later, because actually my belief is that when we're working with organizations, we don't want to encourage them to scale. We actually want them to simplify their organization and descale complexity, because the only way you can manage complexity is by simplifying, not by adding more complex process around it. And that was the essence behind adding the descaling word that sometimes confuses people. And the one I really like in here is the has written case studies on multiple large organizations. It's one of the things that I'm also quite passionate at the moment, is that we're not very good as a community of really getting hard documented case studies written. It's something that I think we need to try and get better at.
Just on that particular one, the last bullet point has invented the descaling framework of principles. That's pretty advanced, would you say?
Yeah, it's a guide innovator for me.
Yeah, the word invent, I thought maybe all the inventions had already been completed, but of course there's still room for more. John and Richard.
So I don't think we've done that, but at the Scrum coaching retreats a few years ago, there was a group that created some principles around.
There were 12 enterprise agile principles, or agile enterprise principles. There was 12 of them. Zia Malik was one of the people who was in there, as well as Tom Reynolds, who helped create the Agile Coaching Growth Wheel. You can search that up. So enterprise, I think it's Agile Enterprise Principles or Enterprise Agile Principles. So these are principles for the enterprise and agile journey as a whole, and they invented those. Those could come under that section, although that's not specifically scaling or descaling.
But it was around how to do this in large organizations. So I think it was probably you could fit that into there.
So the way you would get there, let's talk about how would you get there if you're a normal person, and let's say everything's been invented, right? To answer the question quickly. So you go into an organization and you would coach with them. So that means people, the leaders, the teams, and the product owners and the organization, and they may take an existing descaling or scaling approach and adapt it to their situation. So they might have a few tweaks and adaptations where they're still agile, but they haven't followed it succinctly. So they've deviated from the original baseline, but they found their own way for them. And therefore, with them and through coaching that engagement, you have with them co-created and co-designed and invented a framework or new set of principles with that organization.
However, in order to get this one, we've gone one step further, and you have to use that same framework or principles in multiple organizations.
Right.
Well, I'm not sure it's the same one. Is it? Is it the same one?
That's what I infer, yeah.
Yes,
the same one.
Yeah. That have been used within multiple organizations.
Yeah. So Bola and I attended a meetup last week where a consultancy presented an adapted model of a very popular scaling framework, and I could readily identify what that framework, the base framework, but they haven't just lifted and shifted. They've adapted to make it fit for purpose.
Very good.
And that was quite impressive in quotes, but at least to see it in action, you know, it's something that is encouraging that we haven't actually just finished all the inventions.
Yeah. And last but not least, resolving impediments.
I'll go for this one if I'm not on mute.
No, you're good.
Oh, good. Yeah, probably was a 2. Definitely a 3 now. I mean, it's bread and butter for Scrum Master, which is what we've been doing. You know, Scrum Master, you know, sort of dev lead. It is the heart of the matter, really. I think it's how you add value to a place. You know, I mean, I spent a long time as a software developer, so I know kind of some of the. So I've kind of know these things from both angles. You know, the political human bit of it, and maybe some of the technical side of it. So yeah, I put myself 3 is pretty solid. Solid as I would say, and yeah, I'd look towards a 4. I guess it's like I say, it's what we do, you know.
Okay, so now we've finished filling in our goal, where we are at the minute. We then have a reflection and think about which areas we want to improve going forward. So I'm focusing on my facilitation at the minute with all my systemic modeling work that I'm doing, and also the organizational development work that I'm doing through my agile scoping documentation, leading to a white paper later on this year. Then you can click on the AC growth wheel section, and that will give you a nice picture of where you are at the moment and also where you want to go. And if you've got your past on, it will also have a nice line with your past as well, which you've then got a record of. You might also want to, you can update your column, so you can put the date, so you can put timestamp of your past so that you know when you took that last record. You can use these 3 columns as you wish.
I've got a more visual representation that I did. I can share that one, John.
Yes, please.
Let me see if I can share correctly. Let me just. Right, can you see my screen?
Ooh,
that's quite pretty.
Yeah. Yeah. So all I did was, maybe I can undo. Yeah. So what I did was once I went round in the red with the filling in whether of 4, 5 or whatever. So I went round in the red. I then just used the fill and filled it in to show, help me visually where the gaps are. Yeah. And then I can see from here that maybe I want to improve my facilitating product definition. Because I've been working with product owners, and actually what I've been doing is getting them to do that really, rather than myself. But here I've been helping the organisation resolve impediments too much, and really the organisation I've been currently coaching with, they really need to start doing that. So this needs to go down because they're doing it, yeah, more. Yeah, so that's what I think really needs to, where I need to change my efforts. And interesting, John said, if you do more organisational, your team might go down. But for me, it was slightly different because I've been working with the organisations and the teams and somewhat with the product owners. And what's gone down is actually that my work with the product owners as I've done more work with the current organisation. Yeah. But to John's point is, it's very difficult to do all those 3 all of the time at a high level, I think. I'm sure someone has done it, but there'll be a better person than me from my point of view, which for me is what counts. And it's the same for you. Your point of view is what counts for you. And that's why it's different for everyone. Oops, I've obscured that, haven't I? My mistake. Yeah, so there we go. There we go. So, okay. So that's one way of doing it. And the point of this, showing you this, is you can do it with the spreadsheet, you can do it this visual way, digitally, or you could print it out and draw it, or you could literally just draw your own wheel or numbers. There's many different ways of how you wish to use the tool.
So has anyone got any final questions before we say goodbye?
Thank you
No,
for being
not so
present.
much as a
Yeah, it was
question.
interesting.
Not
Okay.
so much as a question, but obviously the continuation of the journey. I think we spoke about for those who've got the IC Agile ATF and the IC Agile ACC course, and who will now want to move on to the competency-based expert. Exercises such as these is actually a contributing element towards that expert level, because it's part of the journey and it can only get incrementally better. So for me, it's actually a positive experience to have been involved in today's exercise.